Brian Katz went to UT Austin for grad school, so he's here kind of in his homeland. And he also has an MAA book coming out fairly soon. The MAA is starting a series on inquiry-based learning textbooks, and it's on Intro to Proof with a smattering of a lot of different subjects in there. So be looking for that he's co-authored with Michael Starbird. And I'll let him tell you a little bit more about the roundtables.
So just to make sure we're all in the right place, there are a number of topics that some of you over the past couple of years have been interested in. So the goal for today, well, the goals are on the next page. A roundtable participant will, these are our learning objectives, they'll clarify their thinking about teaching challenges that led them to using IBL and that flow from choosing that choice. So sort of why they chose IBL and the consequences of that. They'll encounter new techniques and resources for approaching these teaching challenges, and they'll feel like a part of a supporting community. There's a missing word there. So these are our three objectives. So to accomplish that, you need to be with a group of people who want to talk about the same target audience. So most of those are content courses listed up here, like abstract algebra, but some of them are particular groups of students, like inquiry in secondary school. So does anybody need any more time to get with a group of people they're interested in talking to? All right. So I will pause for a moment while you do that. The list of topics are on the screen, and they're alphabetical through the room. Abstract algebra to topology. It looks like we're almost victorious with phase 0, so good work. Let's clap for ourselves. Yay, team. Woo. Clap for yourselves. Yay. Good job. All right, on to something a little more interesting. So the first phase is what I asked you to do a little thinking in preparation for today. You had some pre-work, and these are the two questions. What challenges inherent in your course content, your student population, or your own teaching are you trying to address by choosing IBL methods? And what challenges for your course content, your student population, and your own teaching does that choice create? So what I want you to do is take a few minutes to introduce yourself officially to your whole table. And as you introduce yourself, articulate a challenge or two, either one that led you to IBL or one that IBL is causing for you. And then we'll share a couple of these. And the reason we're doing this is, well, first of all, it's associated with learning objective 1 to clarify our thinking. But I actually think that one of the core issues with implementing IBL is figuring out what's most important to you and focusing your attention on that. So we're going to practice that for a couple of minutes. We'll share some of the big ideas, and then we'll go back to the tables and think more about sharing techniques and resources. So take a few minutes.
Part of the grade, just to make sure they actually do this, so that there's this running record of the whole class.
The live scribe audio captures the whole thing, and they pass it around, and they take turns. It's not a part of a grade; it's just something.
So Is LiveScribe for PC only, or can you get for the Mac?
No.
Okay, great. Because I think the last time I heard about it,
But then they had
My
to copy it
students
back
came
down.
up with that on their own. You know, I'd have a page full of notes, and I'd start going on to the next. And they'd say, no, don't erase. A lot of my students.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, and right there, you have broken down one of the barriers between faculty and students, because you're probably one of the only classes in the school where they aren't prohibited. No, they're not prohibited from using their cell phones. They're encouraged to use them as an enhancement.
If used appropriately.
Talk about what do you get if you change some of those
I do
for
that.
all students there exists. And you actually usually get something meaningful under those circumstances. It just doesn't mean what you think.
Well, and that actually is, I think, a great exercise, because it always works.
One that I love is they do a day on logic and implication, and they play a little game with these cards. Like you imagine like you're at a bar.
You'd aim for things like summarizing it by a mean or a median, and developing the concept of a distribution and
how well do they correlate? Does the student
and correlation exactly
do well in high school and they come up here and join a fraternity and party?
Exactly.
And so now they're grades like that.
And then take the step of specificity. Well, how could you be? You have a general sense of it.
All right. I think we're ready to do a little bit of sharing. And since a couple of you have asked, I do have a solution to my note-taking problem. This is a LiveScribe pen. It audio captures things, so I ask my students to take notes in class with something that audio captures. But in terms of your sharing now, you don't need to offer solutions, just challenges. So I know there's at least one on each side, one table who's ready to share. So can we get a couple of groups sharing challenges with us? Thank you, Kristen. Please tell us your name first.
My name's Kristen Winkler. I teach secondary math. And we're at the calculus table, and we're finding the biggest challenge to be that we want our students to think deeply about the content and solve the big problems of calculus. At the same time, come out masters of the basic skills at the end of the semester or a year. And with all the content that needs to be covered, that is almost virtually impossible. Although we have a veteran who says that we can be successful. So we're looking forward to hearing more from him.
Excellent. Let's clap for Kristen. Thank you for being brave and going first. We got coverage versus depth. I think that's an excellent summary of it. All right, take it away, TJ.
Okay, so my name is TJ Hitchman. I'm at the University of Northern Iowa, and so we're talking about linear algebra. And in the context of linear algebra, an IBL sort of focused look at it, an opportunity and a challenge at the same time is the fact that linear algebra is the place where abstraction happens as a verb for the first time for most students, right? Where they really have to synthesize, how do I take computations and turn them into some sort of theory, right? How do I see structure underneath that? And so it's often a first opportunity to see proofs, to see symbols that have independent meaning, right? Matrices have letters, but they're different from functions. And there's all sorts of complications inherent in this, and IBL is an opportunity to try and lay that bare for them and make it more apparent.
Excellent. Shall we clap for him? Yes. The answer to that question is always yes. All right, somebody I didn't prime.
My name is Chris Stewart. I'm at the differential equations table, and I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but my concern is instead of giving students a cookbook of different solutions that to be able to drive the model for differential equations and do some qualitative analysis. So that's my challenge.
Excellent, thank you. Well, let's clap for him first. Can you remind us the big ideas of the other two groups? Kristen told us about
quantity versus depth.
Yes. And TJ told us about?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
The catchphrase I got was abstraction as a verb. his first step. Excellent. One more time. Let's clap for all 3 volunteers. So I really like all 3 of these because as a statement, they would guide your course design. If you said, that's the thing that's important to me, that's the thing, I want them to understand that abstraction is a verb, and then you can design a course around that, and that creates other challenges. So, and they're very focusing, these 3 themes, right? They would help you guide and make decisions about everything you needed to do. So for the sort of heftier portion of our time, this one's called Techniques and Resources. So what techniques have you tried or considered to address these or similar challenges? And what resources have you used to support this or similar work? So as a group, pick the most important themes you heard from the introductions or that were inspired by this discussion as the whole group. Share and brainstorm, and we'll do a little more full room sharing at the end. So thank you, and back to your hard work.
I mean, everything's a pattern. Everything's a what do you think, what do you see, what do you know? So to me, it just came right out of the subject matter. But the resources question is great. I mean, like most people, I think I've created a lot of my own stuff because it is really fun.
Of course, that runs through calculus too. And one could ask the question, why is the sine function? Why is it the solution to an antiderivative, say, in terms of the sine function? Why is that close form? It's just people said so, and they brainwash somebody. Really. Now, polynomial, it's hard to argue that that's, if closed form means anything at all. You get a solution in terms of a polynomial or the quotient of 2. It's hard to argue.
So heavily emphasize conceptual understanding, correct notation, correct use of words. I'm not overly picky about how many details those show. I tell them I have to be able to follow your work because in the real world we're going to be working with you.
If you had to pull out a calculator to add 2 and 2, the impression of that other people have of your ability would be diminished. So there's a certain minimal level of things you have to do by hand.
What do I want my students to be able to do and to know at the end of the course? Okay, because if it's quantity, okay, then is IBL the best method to get them there? And, you know, where do we want our students to be, and then what's the best way to get them there?
As long as people ask, you know, what about this, ask questions, but not give you the answer. And so, you know, we turned them in weekly, I wrote up something, didn't feel like it was correct, turned it in, it was 100% correct. It felt great after putting all that work in, it felt great. And so you cannot teach that to a student. They have the experience in it. So I'm very interested in being able to get them to do that, but how do you do it secondary?
Because, you know, I'm in virgin territory in my state. I mean, there's nobody in the state that I can go to that's going to show me.
I think that's what this is for right now.
Yeah,
like I think we're supposed to network here.
And so one of the things that that a student that has had an IBL course and has struggled with trying to create mathematics will realize that Archimedes must have gone through that same struggle. And so if the material that they're reading does not include that struggle, they can imagine that it's there.
Kind of gets this built sort of this community thing, but I always come back and so people will give input and stuff, and a lot of times if you're at the board doing it, you're like sometimes you don't even understand what the people are saying to you. So I try to make sure that whoever's at the board does understand it, and I'll follow up either outside of like if they come see me for something else, and I try to follow up with them. But I do deviate from that because I thought it seems to when they start helping each other out, I like to see that, and so I try to promote that.
If they bite, take the bait, and go with the IBL idea, they'll sit there and try and do things. I'm assuming that most people have had at least something like limits, so they can think.
Well, I think they're going off for the most part and getting together and studying groups and staying up all night and doing. I mean, that's how students. That's how students work at our college.
But if that is the most important part of the course, in my opinion, it is thinking of what I want them to get out of it. I'm not thinking about a flat course, because a specific course may have a different goal. I'm thinking about the goal of a math degree.
Yeah.
If that is the most important goal, then
now the history, philosophy majors, they all have to take the first semester of pre-calculus. And so we have begun doing an algebra review as the first section of that course.
A good example of one source that I would never use in teaching, and that is actually Napier's description of logarithms.
Things you were going to do, just like sequences of questions. And you can just say to your students, okay, for tomorrow, I want you to read the questions and look at the section in the book. And then they come to class, you can be like, okay, we're working on problems 101 through 110 today.
And I don't really know how to, you said you've got some problems they can't work on together, or separately, I mean.
Because they're too hard for most of the individuals to solve on their own. Until you understand a problem relatively well, you can't collaborate on it. That's why. It's because you're throwing them a new problem. Now, those have been problems they had all worked on at home for 2 hours the night before. Then I could say, Javier, look, I tried this. What happened? And he could say, oh, that won't work. I tried that too. Look, I tried this. And I would say, well, that should work. And I'll see something he didn't see, or he'll see something I didn't see. But when you ask...
Immediately when I introduce multivariable limits in the terminal calculus course, they say, I ask could we solve this? And someone always says L'Hopital, because that's their favorite method. Oh, that's their favorite method at Auburn.
It's completely different. It's just a completely different attitude about how...
It's things you don't realize you do for someone, right? Because like Janice and I are doing, it's one of the first times she's done IBL, and I've done it before, and I've forgotten that you just don't think about the things to tell other people, to be like, oh yeah, remember to do this sort of thing.
A number of the students saw it that way. Like they would go home and get online and go to Khan or find some resource that had the lecture piece of it. And and it never was anything I intended to happen, but I know it did.
But that's good. Of course, I have tried to incorporate it in my calculus courses, and so what I've done is I guess it's more called the flipped classroom model, where I've made like take-home lectures where I've used that smart pen that he was talking about, where you have the audio with the lecture notes. And so they'll go home and they'll watch that like one night a week, and then they'll come in and do worksheets that one day. But the other days I've done traditional lecture style because I've had to kind of work within the context of a multi-section calculus course, and I've wanted to.
I made an effort this year to we had a couple of positions open, and I've always taught by the Moore method there, and the students like me and say I do a good job, so nobody bothers me.
Yes, I have that same.
Distance between the shortest path between points by raising a matrix that represents connections between the vertices. Like,
no, that counts the number. That's the number of
oh yeah, number of paths. But at least there's a connection.
Ever taught in my life, and now my colleagues know how cool it is, and they won't let me teach it anymore. They stole it. But this semester,
and that counts as like an English course. What is it?
It counts to like literary and philosophical analysis area of the course. And this semester, the woman who kidnapped it not only kidnapped it, she had a special version of the course for elementary ed students. And so they read all kind of lower elementary school mathematical literature. Totally awesome.
That's motivational. My kids are going to have to be able to answer those kinds of things. Ooh, I got to know this stuff to be ready. And, so anything a problem, I love the problem of 1.5 divided by 1/3 because it jerks them out of this. Another way, this just came totally out of the blue. We had done fractions, you're talking about fractions, how it gets to them. And they'd all, you have to get common denominators. And when we take the test, I hand the test back, and to make grading a little easier, I call it a hybrid test. So part of it is multiple choice bubble sheet, so I don't have to correct that part of it. But then, since they're education majors, I want them to look at student work and get inside the student's head, so I try and model
that there were certain things that were absolutely critical, then I would have to believe that I'm worthless. And so I don't want to do that. So what I'd like to do is believe that what I've learned is a process of approaching
45 out of 60
unsolved problems and conundra that face
the problem with having all these examples, and it's, you start problem 5, and problem 5 says if you have trouble, go look at example 3, and you look at example 3, and the only difference are the numbers are changed, so you can easily get through it without knowing anything.
It's happening in the classroom because they would have been fired for doing this.
When I did it before, I flew under the radar. I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, just in case.
Right, and so there are institutions where your colleagues will look at that and say, oh, that's not teaching. And what happened?
So discussion is going really well. I wanna propose 2 questions that you think about to make sure you're headed in the right direction. The first would be when I'm looking for new IBL ideas, where do I go on the internet? If you haven't shared those things with new users at your table, that's a very important thing to share. And the other is what I wish somebody had said to me before I did my first IBL course / what's the biggest mistake I ever made and how do I try not to do it anymore. If you're running out of sort of things, hopefully those questions will inspire new directions for your conversation. But good work so far.
Yeah, my experience has been there are these punctuated equilibriums. Lectures serve as steady state. Halfway through the semester, I'm probably behind where I would be lecturing typically, but by the end of the semester, I'm either where I would normally be or ahead.
We spend hours and hours of explaining these things and the student fail. And I understand why. Again, learning is by doing, not by watching.
Some people have incredible talents. We should look at the flip side of that. Some people have some deep weaknesses. I think one should kind of recognize the deep weaknesses. Some can be corrected.
Size of the previous one. And it's like a Kenner set.
It is, but it comes out to be an almost three-dimensional Sierpinski triangle.
Mathematics.
Cut the wrong thing.
Talking about like how there's now pseudo-Smith.
Yeah, I've got the idea. I know how it works.
And then it just grows into three-dimensional.
And then
right.
One really brief announcement. In about 10 minutes, we're going to share for the whole room. So it would be a great idea to think about what ideas that have generated would be helpful for people in other content domains to hear about. What are the big ideas, what are the generalizable ideas that could help everyone in the room? And we'll share a few of those in about 10 minutes.
When somebody says mathematics, what do you feel, what do you think, what do you like to learn about? And then they talk about things, and then we share them the second day. And so everybody sort of talks about how almost everybody talks about this horrible experience that they've had about somebody, a teacher that was terrible.
One thing that's definitely happened over the past 10 years is that I used to have to worry about students learning technology, and I don't have to worry about that anymore. They just pick it up, whether it's Mathematica or Law Tech or whatever. That has just gotten universally better.
So I was wondering, why the choice of Mathematica instead of some other software?
I'm really comfortable with Mathematica, so it's easier for me to use it as a vehicle than if I had to learn Sage or something.
I was just wondering if you had any specific reasons.
In that case, you lose your
Did he come from Emory? Is that right?
I don't know his background. I know he's up at
He
New
told
York.
me he was at New Paltz.
New Paltz, right? That's it. New York.
Yeah, that's the thing that finally made the connection. Oh, that's cool.
Here's the reason I came here. Actually, the type of psychologist he was is what England and I are too. Well, and I am too. Analytics and course notes radio, somewhere on there. Yeah, it's fun.
Is there only one shortest way? And you would think that you could just say, okay, this is the shortest way, okay, open your book, page 30. No. So some kid goes up the board and draws this and gets a ruler and measures it, and it's exactly.
Talk about the divisibility rules and why the divisibility rules work, and then you move through there, and then you come back and you revisit this problem, and they're going, we've got some more resources now.
You should take the idea you saw didn't work on the problem we were working on and instate a problem to work on. If that's the
What about your question, though, about where to get these problems?
you are allowed to look into it. You understand.
especially if you're teaching it.
Problem stat, logic, sets, functions, graphs. Right. Makes it sound easy.
Oh yeah.
It's the sorting part where the
Very clearly thinking about it. So if you want a model for that kind of, just something to think about.
I'm a big fan of it. And one guy proposes, well, it ought to be the exact same distance from all three cities. So.
Hello, everyone. It's time to bring it back together for a little while. So, this is not the very end, but I wanted to make sure that ideas were being spread between the tables. So we have a volunteer who had something, and so while he's getting up there, I'll give an example, which is one thing that happens in an IBL class is that the students often want to just turn around and look at the instructor after a presentation and have them say, was that good or not? And I've had people suggest that you wear sunglasses in class so they can't see your eyes. And that doesn't quite work for me, but the one that does work for me is beforehand thinking about what questions I ask after a presentation so that I don't have a tell, right? Like a poker tell. Like I ask the same questions after a correct and an incorrect presentation because they're the questions you ask after a presentation as opposed to giving away which one's right or wrong. So that's one idea that I might share. So that's sort of an in-class example. And I think our first volunteer over there has our resources, and then this half of the room, by the time he's done sharing that one, you got to get a volunteer up there to share something with the rest of the room. So,
hi, my name is Ryan Mahoney. I'm a secondary teacher from the Blake School in Minneapolis, and we went to a conference, our whole department, the Phillips Exeter Academy, about a couple years ago, and they've been using IBL type curriculum for about 25 or 30 years, which is extremely well developed, got tons of great questions, and goes all the way through Algebra 1 up to post-calculus type of questions. So that's free and available online and a great resource. It tends to spiral through all the topics, so you have to kind of pick out what you need unless you're going to use it as a course. And in reference to your question, one idea, I often ask if the students, do they agree or disagree with what's put up on the board, and use that as a starting point for the discussion. So I'm not part of the yes or no, they're part of the yes or no.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we're trying to think about is how do you package material? What do you want to cover? What are the goals that you're aiming for? And so I think one of the big challenges is abstract algebra is currently written in a certain form. It starts with groups, it goes to rings, it goes to fields. It's very abstract from the beginning and builds that way. And one of the things we were just talking about is how do you make this something which is a little more discovery-based? What are the sort of big ideas or problems that you want to bring to the table so that people can discover whatever the topics are that you think are important? So we didn't mention this in the group, but if you want to talk about quotient groups, how do you come up with a problem so that students don't know anything about quotient groups, but after they've thought about the problem, they say, oh, I want to invent this thing, which is a quotient group, for instance. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, Frank Sturm. I'm a grad student at Auburn University. We were discussing math for elementary pre-service teachers. One of the questions that was, or concerns, what if we don't cover all the material? So one of the recommendations is if you have some of the smaller problems, set it up as like a project list or an outside list of questions that might intrigue someone and have them work on it on their own or in your office and then present to the class. So.
I'm Janice Reck, University of Nebraska at Omaha. And we talked about the need to market well and how to market continuously throughout the semester to get their students to buy in. We also talked about problems with good problems. Trying to come up with those good problems. We're doing calculus to involve our students that they still have to know techniques, right? But then how do we apply them? How do we get them to take it to the next level and see it as really relevant and to get that buy-in and just finding those really good problems to use with our students.
Do you have specific ideas about how to sell?
Well, we had good suggestions on this continual reinforcement. And what was your term? Deliberate choices. using that phrase with the class, making deliberate choices about instruction to get the students to buy in about what it is that we're doing to make those deliberate choices. And then there was also a suggestion of some textbooks like Instructor Guide with Stewart that actually had really good problems. And then Carissa said that, yeah, she's had it on her shelf for a couple of years and never really looked at it, and now would go to that resource to find some of those really good problems. So those were a couple ideas that came up on how we can look at both of those problems and encounter them and solve them somewhat.
Excellent, thank you. We have someone over here, and then you over there. You can stand if you want.
I'm Lee May from Salisbury University in Maryland. I was at the liberal arts mathematics table, and I'm following up the previous comments on buy-in. We talked about buy-in in the liberal arts mathematics course, but it's something that all of us are concerned about when we try to do IBL. Of course, the buy-in's critical. We also realize that it's audience dependent, especially in a liberal arts mathematics course. Also, it differs by instructor. We had an example that Jackie gave where Ron Taylor of Berry College hits the kids in the face with the IBL on the first day by juggling and having one of them who's never juggled before try to juggle. Others of us try to insinuate the IBL subtly into the class as things go along. We maybe don't even mention the term IBL or Moore method or anything like that. I like to use the book by Parker Palmer called The Courage to Teach, which is a good book no matter whether you're teaching mathematics or political science. And in it, he has two wonderful diagrams, one of the traditional classroom where you have the subject, or I think he actually calls it the object in this paradigm, above everybody else. Then there's an arrow going from the object to the expert, and then there are arrows coming from the expert to all the amateurs. And all the arrows are one directional. Palmer's proposal for a paradigm for education is called the community of learning. And think of a circle with the subject in the center of the circle, and on the circumference of the circle, there are the learners. One of the learners is the instructor, but you can't tell which one he or she is. And there are arrows going all over the place, from the subject outward, from the learners inward, and from the learners toward one another. That's what Parker Palmer proposes. And that's a way to illustrate the difference between IBL and the traditional lecture method. And then you can actually I present those two diagrams to my students and tell them, if you like the lecture method model, then you probably ought to drop my section right now and move into somebody else's, because we're going to do it with a community of learning approach.
And the title of that one was The Courage to Teach, right?
Yeah, The Courage to Teach by Parker Palmer.
Great, thank you. You guys want to start? We have one more very excited group.
I just need to stand up, really. So our group talked quite a bit about resources and how important having access to either good questions or good prompts, good animations was critical to our courses being successful without us having to develop every single thing ourselves. And we talked about online resources, how hard it is to navigate through how much there is out there. I mentioned a resource I've been involved in, which is the Classroom Capsules project on the MAA and MathDL, that links articles from particularly CMJ to particular courses and how those can be starting points, even though they're not IBL. Then we got, to quote someone from yesterday, meta, and we talked about people as resources for leveraging other resources and how much we appreciated being brought together in community here where we could share things that work with one another.
Excellent, thank you so much. There's a big one that hasn't been mentioned, so just to make sure everyone has heard of it, the JIBLM, Journal of Inquiry-Based Learning in Mathematics, has a bunch of vetted course notes, and I think all of them you have to, most of the authors allow access to them. So you can modify them, first of all, for your own purposes, but also that you can contact many of the authors and ask them questions. So that's a great resource, and many of the people who are in charge of that are here. So many of you are going to want to go back to the content-specific discussions you were having, but while you're doing that, I have 4 suggestions. Take a couple of minutes to articulate the new ideas you have encountered. This is actually something I really think I learned from Harry Lucas. His sort of amazing ability to get things done, I think, comes from he takes the minute after he's learned something and he writes down a version of it in his notes for himself. Share email addresses with your table mates. There's a list inside your silver folder that should have all the addresses, so you can there's probably, there's lots of errors, but that's a starting place so it's a little less overwhelming and less handwriting. Make sure any resources that were noted, you have sufficient notes on them. And some people had somebody taking minutes or writing those down. So maybe send those emails to each other. And remember that both asking and responding to the question helps you learn. So whether you come in experienced or inexperienced, I hope this was a valuable conversation. So you should thank everyone on your team for their efforts to help you learn. So I hope you will continue chatting here, sort of casual time. Starting 10:30, we have some refreshments, and we need to be back by 11 for the 5-minute presentations. And just so we're sure, the first 2 are Carol Mead and Randy Cohn, so just so you're warned. But use this time to finish with your discipline-specific sharing. All right. So just the two really brief wrap-up things. Our learning objectives are on the screen, and I hope I've seen examples of each of these today. Tina said she got really great ideas, which is the second type. Someone over here said they felt supported and part of a community, and I've definitely heard some clear talking about the issues at hand. The very last thing is, if you do send summaries from your individual groups to each other, it'd be great if you included me so that I could hear them, because I didn't get to participate in any of the groups, and I'm interested. I know. So thank you so much for your time.